If you have elevated insulin level, you cannot burn the fat, even though you diet?
It's impossible to burn stored fat when insulin is high, correct? He lost 20 pounds in the first 30 days by tripling his calories. How do you explain that to people who think it's just about calories in versus calories out? Like, no, it's not. There's so much more to it.
Old approaches crumbling, and there's this new health era is starting.
Oh, the body can create new fat cells. Yeah, absolutely. And 25 French fries cooked in seed oils were equivalent to 25 tobacco cigarettes smoked. Okay?
Wow.
In terms of
Hold on.
Human beings are the only species smart enough to create their own food and dumb enough to actually eat it, right? Here's another great tip for your audience. Don't follow 10 people on fat loss or 10 people on longevity. Follow 1, 2, 3 people maximum and go deep. I'll give your audience right now some simple things they can do.
I'm Dr. Esra Çavuşoğlu, and I've been living a sober life for the past 20 years. My battle with addiction drove me to seek new methods, devices, and supplements to improve my physical and mental performance, enhance my quality of life, and ultimately live healthier for longer. From my experiences in addiction recovery, biohacking and longevity, to the latest global developments, from groundbreaking entrepreneurs to expert academics, the conversations I've had over the years are now featured weekly on Soberhead Podcast. Welcome to Soberhead Podcast. This week, I'm joined again by Ben Azadi, a leading voice in metabolic health, fasting, keto, and true metabolic freedom. Ben is back with 2 powerful books, Metabolic Freedom and the revised edition of Keto Flex. But this conversation is not about dieting, restriction, or staying in ketosis forever. It is about understanding why so many people feel stuck in their bodies, why weight loss is often not a calorie problem but a cellular problem, and how inflammation, insulin resistance, seed oils, stress, poor sleep, and chronic snacking can silently block the body's ability to burn fat and heal. We also go into metabolic flexibility, carnivore, and elimination protocols, carb flex days, mitochondrial health, and what it really means to become metabolically free. Let's dive in. Üniversiteyi sadece dersler, vizeler, finaller olarak düşünme. Asıl mesele okurken kendini keşfetmek, üretmek, projelerde yer almak ve mezun olmadan gerçek dünyayı tanımaya başlamak. Bir yandan psikolojiyle insanı daha iyi anlayabildiğin, beslenme ve sağlık bilimleriyle iyi yaşamanın ne demek olduğunu öğrendiğin, mühendislik ve yönetim bilişim sistemleriyle teknolojiyi, veriyi ve sistemi çözümleyebildiğin bir üniversite düşün. Yani sadece bilgi aldığın değil, düşündüğün, ürettiğin ve fikirlerini hayata geçirebildiğin bir yer. İstanbul Gedik Üniversitesi, öğrencilik hayatını gerçekten yaşarken geleceğini kurabileceğin bir deneyim sunuyor. Ayık Kafa'nın daimi destekçisi Gedik Eğitim Vakfı'nın sağladığı katkı ile size dünyanın önde gelen uzmanlarını konuk olarak getirmeye devam ediyoruz. Siz de Ayık Kafa'ya abone olarak destek verebilirsiniz. My friend Ben Azadi, welcome back to Soberhead Podcast. So excited that you're here.
I'm excited. I'm grateful to be here with you. We were just spending some time in Austin like a month ago.
Yeah.
We had dinner. So Esra, always a pleasure to see you. Thanks for having me back on your show.
Well, Ben, my audience really wanted you back. I mean, I had so much messages and private emails and stuff because they like your energy, they like the wisdom, they like that you have your own story that you share with people so they can relate. And you give practical tools as well. So welcome, my friend. I have your book that is going to be in the fall out in Turkish. This is the English version. You're going to be out like next week with the Keto Flex Revised, I think, in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Very soon.
Yeah. And 2 weeks from this recording right now. Yeah, this is the new one here. Yeah, exactly.
And we're going to be airing the podcast, on the 23rd. So like it's going to be kind of simultaneously that we're going to share what's in the book with the audience. So until they receive the book or they have the Turkish translation, they at least would have a little taste of it. My friend, I would like to start. You have 2 very touching, like a punch. Actually, it's not touching, it's a punching phrase that really moved me. And I would like to read them. You say that we don't have a weight problem, we have a weight symptom. That's number 1. And the second one, you don't lose weight to get healthy, you get healthy to lose weight. These are so thought-provoking and made me really think. And, I do so many podcasts with such amazing people. But to be honest with you, I couldn't find the answers to neither of these. I thought, what does he mean? So let's start. What do you mean by these?
Yeah, I love that you started there. It's so important to understand these different quotes that you just shared that are in the book, because for so many years, I had a different philosophy, a different premise that most people have to this day. They're looking for ways to lose weight. That is their number one priority. I need to lose weight. And that was my priority when I was 80 pounds overweight, but it's not how the body works, right? I mentioned that you don't lose weight to get healthy, you get healthy to lose weight. What happens is when you get healthy, when you start lowering inflammation, removing the interference, balancing your hormones, the weight comes off as a side effect, which shows that the current approach of weight loss is so dialed into caloric restriction, right? Willpower deprivation, even like GLP-1 drugs, which help some people lose weight, but they're starting off on the wrong premise because they're so focused on the weight loss and they're forgetting about the health part. So when you just count calories, Esra, it's a distraction to what really matters, which is hormones, inflammation, removing the interference. So you're going to be left frustrated. You're going to be chasing the wrong angle here. And with the metabolism, nobody has a weight problem. It's a weight symptom. When I was obese, I never had a weight problem. It was a weight symptom. By focusing on weight loss and fat loss and caloric restriction, you're focusing on the symptom. And you might make some progress in the beginning, but long-term, you're going to have setbacks, plateaus, and you're going to find yourself frustrated. That's why counting calories, caloric restriction, fails for most people long-term because it's focused on the wrong thing. But when you start removing the interference, eating the foods we're going to talk about, practicing the different lifestyle changes we'll talk about today, you get healthier and healthier. And a side effect is that you start dropping the weight. You start dropping the extra fat. And what's really cool is that it stays off long-term. And it's so much easier because you're not relying on willpower, caloric restriction, deprivation. You're just allowing your body to do what it was designed to do because you remove the interference.
I'm so excited about the times that we're in, and I was sharing this exact sentence with Dr. Dave Rabin that I was interviewing 2 days ago, because so much of the old sayings, old approaches, it's kind of crumbling, and there's this new health era is starting. Friday, I did a podcast with Dr. Gabrielle Lyon, and she also is saying something kind of similar to you, not exactly what you're saying about the fat, but she says I realize that we don't have obesity problem, we have lack of muscle problem. All of you guys are now looking that, whatever we're doing is causing us to put these unhealthy fat, some people says angry fat, it's so interesting words that they're saying now. But yours is very, very interesting because everybody is touching base on one thing, but you are giving us a rainbow of problems. Rainbow is a good thing actually, but a problems, but also a rainbow of solutions. So what is causing this metabolic problem? I think it's not one thing. Let me jump in for a very quick second. If you can hear me right now, we know you're watching Soberhead. But are you subscribed? Could you check it for me? Very honestly, our subscriber count gives us real leverage when it comes to convincing the guests we invite to join the show. So, if you want to keep watching some of the best experts in their field right here, please subscribe to the channel.
You're right. It's absolutely multifactorial. It's many things. It starts with insulin being the key player here. We have many hormones inside of the body, hundreds of hormones, but insulin is the key player because insulin is the hormone that is the primary hormone for energy storage and fat storage. And what happens is when our metabolism is stuck burning sugar and glucose, primarily from food, because we're eating high carbohydrate diets, processed carbohydrate diets, and we're snacking and grazing, eating every 2 to 3 hours, what happens over time is that blood sugar goes up in the bloodstream, obviously with those foods and those behaviors, but then insulin is produced to clear that excess glucose. And the body's designed to do that magnificently. God designed the body to do that. But when we overwhelm the body, we overwhelm the pancreas, which produces insulin, it just cannot keep up with the demand. So then it produces more insulin to clear the glucose. And then it produces more and more. And then eventually those receptor sites that need to hear insulin to get the glucose into the cell, they stop listening. And the analogy that I give, it's like if you have children and their bedroom is a mess and you yell at your kids, go clean your damn room, it's a mess, and you start yelling at them, they're going to say, whoa, mom is pissed, dad is pissed, I'm going to listen, I'm going to go clean my room. But if you continue to yell at your kids, go clean their room every day for months and years, what happens after a few years? They stop listening. It's the same thing with insulin. If you keep producing massive amounts of insulin, the receptor sites stop listening. And what happens, Esra, then the blood sugar climbs up, then you go to your doctor's appointment and they check your fasting glucose or your hemoglobin A1C, hopefully, and then it's flagged as, oh, you're pre-diabetic. Or if it's been a long time since you've gotten the test, you're full-blown diabetic. But what's really fascinating, and I talk about this in Metabolic Freedom, is that you could have massive amounts of insulin, which is called hyperinsulinemia, which leads to insulin resistance. That could be happening for 6 to 14 years without your blood sugars changing, without your A1C changing, which is just showing that your body is producing so much insulin, the screaming, to clear the glucose. So the most important test that I want your audience to get done, I'm not sure if you could get this in Türkiye, is how I'm going to pronounce it now, is a fasting insulin blood test. You want that to be very in a functional range, which shows you have sensitive levels of insulin. If you have a optimal fasting insulin, you're healthy and you're going to burn fat and you're going to have a healthy metabolism.
If you have elevated insulin level, what happens? You cannot burn the fat even though you diet?
Yeah,
Oh.
it's impossible to burn stored fat when insulin is high, correct?
It's so funny. I know people like that. I don't want to name names, but I mean, when I see their insulin level, because I did a podcast with Ben Bickman, then I learned all about the insulin. And when I see their insulin is like 12, I said, like, what is that? Like 12 is like, it's unacceptable, or 9. And nobody tells them nothing. And I see now their body shape is in front of my eyes, and I see that they have this belly. They have lean legs maybe, but they have this accumulated kind of fat around their belly. So high insulin is causing not to lose weight or burn fat? Interesting.
That's correct. Yeah, exactly what you just said. And they could even look skinny on the outside, but have that belly fat, have the visceral fat, which is that organ fat. And that goes back to the opening, the way we started this conversation. So many people are going on the internet and they're looking for, what's the best diet to lose weight? How do I lose 10 pounds in the next 30 days? They're looking for these weight loss approaches when their question should be, how do I lower the hormone insulin? That is how you get healthy to lose weight versus the other way around.
I know that you're also very much focusing on the environmental toxins that is really causing our hormone metabolism and our metabolism not to function properly. Explain to me, please, how can a pollution or microplastic or scented candle can cause my metabolic dysfunction?
It's a big player, especially in this day and age with these environmental toxins that are more than what we've ever had in the history of humanity. And it's the things you mentioned. It's even the cash register receipt, which is really interesting. I talk about.
Tell us a little bit. I just suddenly jumped out of my skin thinking all the receipts that I'm holding in my hand.
Yeah, not just you, everybody, right? And who would have thought that the cash register receipt might be causing inflammation and maybe interfering with weight loss efforts? Because it turns out that they've done studies on these receipts. The same receipts that you get from the cashier at your grocery store or the gas station. I mean, all these, they're called thermal receipts. They've done studies on them, and it showed that these receipts contain up to 2,000 times more of these toxins called BPA than canned food. And when you touch it with your hands, of course, what goes on your skin goes into your bloodstream. And I've seen women here in the US, they go to Whole Foods supermarket and they'll grab the receipt, they'll put it in their bra, and now they have that being absorbed in their breast tissue. And of course, then you put it in your pocket, and now your pocket's coated with this toxin. And what happens with all these toxins, what they're doing to interfere with our metabolism, which was your question, is this. The number one priority for the human body is survival. It will do everything possible to survive. It wants to survive. So when these toxins enter the body through cash register receipts, through processed foods, through our environment, the scented candles, the microplastics, the things you mentioned, when those toxins enter the body says, oh, we cannot allow these toxins to enter the vital organs and kill you right away. So it turns on a pathway called PPAR gamma. And that pathway's job is to shuttle those toxins out of the bloodstream because they might enter your vital organs and kill you. So it shuttles those toxins out of your bloodstream and it sends them into your fat cells. It actually works very similar to insulin and what insulin does to glucose. This is what PPAR gamma does to toxins. And then the reason why it goes into your fat cells is because there's room there. The solution to pollution is dilution. It could dilute these toxins in these fat cells. And if the fat cells run out of room, it'll expand the fat cells and make them bigger. And if you run out of room there, it'll create new fat cells for those toxins to live in.
Oh, so we can have new fat cells? I didn't know that. Oh, boy.
Oh, the body can create new fat cells. Yeah, absolutely. And toxins create that. So these toxins are called obesogens. They're influencing obesity in human beings and in animals. There's also another set of toxins called diabetogens that I talk about in the book that create insulin resistance and eventually diabetes. And when I talk about this, there's some fear that comes up. And I don't want this to be a fearful conversation. I know you don't want it to be as well. So I'll give your audience right now some simple things they can do to eliminate their toxic load that I talk about in the book. Is that okay for me to share?
Sure, of course.
So you mentioned the microplastics. Let's start there because you're right. Plastics are everywhere. You can't avoid them. But there's some things you can do right now to really lower your exposure, right? So number one, when you're drinking out of water bottles, make sure it's out of glass. Like I have a glass bottle right here. It's always glass. Sometimes you can't find glass and that's okay from time to time. But for the most part, you want glass water bottles instead of plastic. Number two, if you cook at home and you use a cutting board, you do not want to use a plastic cutting board because as you cut that plastic cutting board, thousands and thousands of these microplastics get into the food. So switch that to a wooden cutting board. That's going to be a good swap for you. And then the third thing when it comes to microplastics is to avoid using plastic Tupperware containers that people put into microwaves. Switch over to glass. That will help with the plastic piece. And then for the receipts, just decline the receipts. Yeah. Say, no, thank you. I don't need it. Just look at your credit card statement for your receipt. Like just say no to receipts. And then the last thing here is as much as possible, eat organic, eat foods that are lower in contaminants. In the US, it's a problem here with glyphosate and chemicals in our food. Here. But as much as possible, eat organic food. Same thing in your country? Yeah.
Unfortunately,
really? Okay.
Because we're not regulated like Europe. Unfortunately, like England, Turkey, North America, we're all having the same problem, unfortunately. Yeah.
So you guys use glyphosate over there as well?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So then this is important for your audience to avoid that as much as possible.
I know that you didn't want to scare people, but in order for them to understand how serious it is, they need to be scared a little bit because I started since October, I started a robust social media. And whenever I'm posting information like this, it's getting like 1.5 million views because people keep sending each other to educate each other. So this fat cell thing is very interesting because when I did a podcast with JJ Virgin, she shared the toxin parts. She didn't share how the toxins are getting in the fat. And then she added, do not do any type of a juice fasting or anything because then these toxins are going to be freed in the system. The bad fat cells are going to release them and there's nothing to bind them and it's going to be spreading all over your system. But I thought that was like maybe... I don't even know. Like I thought that I was educated, but each time I have a new podcast, my jaw dropped. This is very interesting, very important. You said two things that, I took notes actually here before we started, obesogens and diabetogens. Obesogens are basically the things that we spoke about, the toxins.
Medical literature, they're called lipophilic toxins. So what it means is that they're fat-loving toxins. So they go into your fat cells. It's the exact ones we spoke about, the microplastics, the glyphosate, all the things we mentioned. These are toxins that create fat human beings, obese individuals.
And what about the other one, diabetogens? Are the same thing or are different stuff?
These are a little bit different. This is a new classification. Like these, chances are your audience have never heard of diabetogens.
Neither
it's a new classification of, yeah, it's fairly new. And these are more of the heavy metals, like mercury and amalgam fillings and lead in certain foods. So these are more of the heavy metals that trigger beta cell dysfunction in the pancreas, which is where you produce insulin, which leads to first insulin resistance, and then it could also trigger type 1 or type 2 diabetes. So they're called diabetogens, and I talk about them in Metabolic Freedom.
Yeah, I mean, it's so important. Everybody knows seed oils, at least the, canola oil and etc., they're not good. Nobody explains like you do. Unless people get into the scientific literature, they would not know. I asked to Mark Hyman, he just quickly passed over because he didn't have much time at some point. Seed oils became somehow, unfortunately, a part of our lives because, even though if at home we're not cooking with them, when we go to a restaurant, there's no way we know about what they're cooking it with. Unfortunately, also, people who don't have enough means, enough financial freedom, they're leaning towards seed oils because they're cheaper than olive oil or grass-fed butter. You also see these people, unfortunately, are obese, maybe not like American-style 400 pounds obese, but you can see the fat covering their system. Why seed oil is so bad, or which type of seed oil bad, and which type of seed oil we can use, because that's also an important information.
Yeah, I love this topic, and it's a great question because there are a set of seed oils that are very healthy for you and anti-inflammatory and amazing. So just by saying all seed oils are bad, that's not an accurate statement. It's the processed seed oils that are really, really bad for you. And in the United States, about 80% of our entire food supply contain these processed seed oils. And if you look back at the early 1900s, there was barely any of these seed oils in our environment. And then as the decades and decades went on, eventually over a century, now it's an 80% of our food supply. What a dramatic increase. And here's the reason why. I'll give your audience the mechanism, and then I'll give your audience the ones to avoid, the safer ones, and then what to look out for, and what to do at restaurants as well. The mechanism is this. These seed oils are called omega-6 fats. There are also other names for it, like polyunsaturated fats, linoleic acid, vegetable oil, seed oils. They're all the same thing. And the reason why they're so inflammatory is because they're unstable. So when they study these seed oils, these fats under a microscope, and they analyze the content of it, it's a polyunsaturated fat. The word poly means many. So it contains many double bonds. That's the chemical structure of these fats. The more double bonds a fat has, the more unstable it is, the more reactive it's going to be to things like light and pressure and heat. Those are the exact things they use to process these seed oils, light, pressure, and heat. So it makes it go unstable. It goes rancid as it's being processed. And now it's an inflammatory fat that they've produced. They put into a plastic bottle, and then we refry it, we refry it, and now it's such an inflammatory fat. And then it saturates the cell membranes, it builds up our tissues. And I talked about this recently at Dave's event when I was speaking on stage. There's a study from Dr. Martin Grudefeld, who's a toxicologist, and he reviewed French fries cooked in vegetable oil, seed oils, and he looked at aldehydes that were produced. Aldehydes are cancer-causing. It's what happens when you smoke a lot of tobacco cigarettes, you produce aldehydes. And he showed in his research that 25 French fries cooked in seed oils were equivalent to 25 tobacco cigarettes smoked. Okay?
Wow.
In terms of
Hold on. So 1-to-1? Like one single
one French fry, tobacco cigarette smoked.
Oh boy. Wow.
That's from the aldehydes that he looked at. And you might think, okay, but the body is so smart and so resilient and so amazing. And I agree. You might think you could remove these bad fats like in days or in a week or with the cleanse, but no, it doesn't work that way. The half-life of these bad fats in your cells is 2 years, about 2 years, 680 days, which means if you stop eating them today, 2 years later, half of them will be in your cells, in your fat cells, in your membranes, creating inflammation. And it takes about 6 years for your body to get rid of 95% of it. So I'll give your audience the ones to avoid. There's 8 of them that you want to look out for on labels. You want to avoid these at all costs. We have canola oil, also called rapeseed oil in the UK. We have corn oil and cottonseed oil. Then we have sunflower oil, soybean oil, and safflower oil. And then we have rice bran oil and grape seed oil. Those are the 8 to avoid. Instead, you want to swap them for saturated fats,
I do want to ask one question before we pass to that. So I never heard about the grapeseed oil. So it sounds like more not that guilty. Whether it's you use it in a fried or not, the same damage happens?
It's worse to fry it after the fact, but simply because of the processing of it before it goes into the bottle, it's already unstable. But if you fry with it after, it's even worse, to your point. Now, look, if you could find organic, cold-pressed grapeseed oil or organic cold-pressed sunflower oil, and you don't heat it up, use it as a salad dressing or a dip, those are completely healthy. Those are healthy omega-6 fats, but most products don't have that. Instead, you want to swap the polyunsaturated fats for saturated fat. So I mentioned poly means many, many double bonds. Saturated fats have 0 double bonds, making it very stable, even at high heat. So those are going to be, you mentioned a few earlier, butter, ghee, beef tallow, duck fat, coconut oil. Those are terrific to cook with. And then we have monounsaturated fats, which have, mono means a single double bond, not as stable as saturated fats, but more stable than the seed oils. Those are going to be olive oil, especially extra virgin olive oil, which is my favorite. I actually have a bottle that I have here that I just take from time to time on my desk. And then avocado oil. So that simple swap goes a long way. And then one more thing, when I go to restaurants, I tell the server that I'm allergic to vegetable oils. And they make that message, they give that message to the chef, and then the chef uses olive oil or they grill, they accommodate. So that's how I'm able to avoid it at restaurants. I just tell the server I'm allergic to those oils, and they accommodate by using healthier swaps.
Or they share with you, this contains vegetable oils, therefore don't eat it. That's even a break. When you described all these, like, the good things, you said the beef tallow or butter or whatever, it's the first time I heard a terminology from you, greenwashing. Actually, my editor here sitting next to me, he says, I know that term. This is used in the field of global warming and stuff. So what do you mean by greenwashing? That's interesting.
It's what companies do to promote a product and make you think that it's healthier for the environment, it's healthier for you, when it's actually not. It's just marketing gimmicks. And we see that with a lot of food products out there. Like, for example, like the plant-based movement is another form of greenwashing. It's not going to make the planet healthier if you are just eating plants and avoiding animals. It's greenwashing. It's a way to distract people with fancy marketing where they think they're doing something right for the planet, for their health, but actually it's not doing that. So it's a deceptive way to market to the society that is not fair for people, but it happens all the time.
These days it's happening a lot because, with protein, with beef tallow, because, anytime I travel to United States, obviously I lived there. Therefore, I'm very familiar with the supermarkets and et cetera. All the shelves now are like protein-added chips or beef tallow used popcorn,
French fries,
or something, or some drinks that is saying like, oh, this has spirit or whatever. And if the people do not read the labels, it's just like the same shit. I don't want to use like cursing words, but when you look behind, it's the same amount of sugar, same amount of processed stuff, some wording that I cannot even pronounce. So that's what you're saying, yeah? On the front, it seems healthy, it seems supportive to the planet and etc. But actually it's the same.
That's exactly it. Yeah. So we see that because there's different health topics that are trending these days. The probiotics being one of them, spirulina, apple cider vinegar, creatine. So you're going to find like creatine gummies, apple cider vinegar gummies, and you're going to say, oh, that's great. I'm, taking something healthy. But to your point, Esra, you look at the ingredients label and there's a whole bunch of crap in there, things you cannot pronounce. And I say in the book that human beings are the only species smart enough to create their own food and dumb enough to actually eat it, right? You don't want to eat frankenfood. You want to eat whole foods, which are single ingredient foods. It's a good starting point for most people. Just eat single ingredient foods.
Let me jump in for a very quick second. If you can hear me right now, we know you're watching Soberhead. But are you subscribed? Could you check it for me? Very honestly, our subscriber count gives us real leverage when it comes to convincing the guests we invite to join the show. So, if you want to keep watching some of the best experts in their field right here, please subscribe to the channel. I know that you are a very spiritual person, and all the pictures that I see from your new studio, there's a huge, I think, an ancient Bible over there, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
On your t-shirt, I see the vitamin G gratitude. And you make also a point that the chronic stress also would hurt the metabolism. Help us to understand.
It's the silent stressor that's happening to a lot of people, because people don't realize that stress is a signal you send to your body to put it in survival mode. And when the body feels threatened, it will not want to burn fat.
Mm-hmm.
It won't burn fat because that's not a priority for it. As a matter of fact, it's anti-survival to burn fat. It will want to preserve that precious fuel supply when it feels a threat, which is stress. And the body can't distinguish between that threat being an actual physical threat, like something that's about to kill you and eat you, or the threat, stress from social media, from the news, from being stuck in traffic, from a toxic relationship. All that stress are signals to your body. You're not safe. Store fat, preserve fat, do not burn the fat. And what's really interesting is that belly fat. So I'm writing a brand new book right now that's going to be out in 2027. It's my favorite book to date. It's about belly fat, visceral fat. It's almost done. And I can't wait to come back on the podcast and talk about that in 2027. In the book, I talk about visceral fat. So visceral fat, let me hold this up for you.
Sure.
Visceral fat is this right here. This is 5 pounds of visceral fat. This is the type of fat that you can't necessarily see because it's inside your belly and it wraps around your organs, your heart, your pancreas, your liver, your kidneys, your vital organs. And it's the most inflammatory fat inside of your body. It's very metabolically active and it creates inflammation, which leads to more weight gain. It's a vicious cycle. And in the new book, I talk about stress in a chapter. And the research shows that you have receptor sites in your body for cortisol, obviously, but it turns out there are 3 times as many receptor sites for cortisol in that visceral fat than other areas of fat in your body. That's why it's called the cortisol belly.
Sure.
It leads to weight gain and the inability to burn that fat. So, you mentioned I'm a spiritual person. I have my relationship with God. I love gratitude and dinners and communication with people and relationships. All these things help to lower cortisol. You want to find ways to raise oxytocin. You want to change the signal so your body feels safe. When your body feels safe, it will start to burn fat. You do that with gratitude, you do it with God, you do it with grounding, you do it with relationships, you do it with sleep and recovery. There's so many ways to do it, but stress is the missing piece for a lot of people, Esra.
So that's what you mean then, when you mentioned about when the body feels safe, it automatically loses weight. That's what you're meaning. So the cortisol would drop and then the body would start processing the food we eat much better and the exercise we do much better. But, I also want to then jump about the body holding on things, because I also do see a lot of people that are starving themselves in a weird way. They are complaining that they're not able to lose weight. So please explain that phenomenon, because, no matter what I say, I'm not able to pass this message. And I know very close people, and they're they're just drop their food intake into maybe 1,000 calories per day. And they're like, I'm not able to lose weight. I said, because you're not eating and your body is holding on what you have. But you explain in such great way that please help us to understand.
Yeah, it's really important. And I'm glad you brought this up. I see it a lot too. The signal needs to change, because right now, if you've been in a caloric deficit for months, or you're doing excess fasting, excess training, the signal you've sent to your metabolism is that there's a lot of stress, there's a famine, food is not readily available. So again, as I said earlier, the number one priority for the human body is survival. It wants to survive, so it will preserve its precious fuel. And we need to change the signal and nourish the body, teach it that it's going through abundant times, and actually feast, right? That could mean doubling your caloric intake, tripling it, and losing weight. And in that new belly fat book, I actually open up the introduction with my friend Chris, who built the studio here. Chris came to me several months ago, exactly like the person you just mentioned. He was over 100 pounds overweight. He was doing OMAD, 1 meal a day, for years. He was in a caloric deficit for years, and he couldn't budge. He was tired, he was inflamed, and his weight was stuck. And I told Chris, your body, the signal you sent it is that it's going through tough times. It's stressed out. We need to change the signal, and we need to nourish you. You need to feast, Chris. I tripled his caloric intake. He lost 20 pounds in the first 30 days by tripling his calories. How do you explain that to people who think it's just about calories in versus calories out? Like, no, it's not. There's so much more to it. So if that's you, if you hit a plateau and you think it's about exercising more or cutting your calories more or fasting more, it might be about adding more, nourishing the body, having high quality protein, increasing your calories, having a day where you don't fast, and mixing things up so you send a signal that you're safe, burn fat. And once you do that, then the weight starts to come off because if the body feels threatened, it will not burn that fat. It's the same thing that happened to Chris.
You know, the name of the book is very appealing and interesting. I'm sure everybody would like to be metabolically free. What do you mean by that? You know, like, how can someone be metabolically free? What do they need to do in order to achieve this freedom? Because I know that you're not talking about dieting or restriction, because many people are afraid. To be honest with you, many people now, there's the fear of carbohydrate, the fear of eating, like you said, feasting, the fear of eating 3 meals. And since there's this OMAD and intermittent fasting and stuff, people think that that's the solution. But your solution is so different. How can someone be free?
Yeah, we all want that, right? Metabolic freedom. Being metabolically free is the key. That is metabolic flexibility. And that means you could eat whatever you want. You could have your carbs, you could have your protein, you could have your fat, and you have such a healthy metabolism. You use it for fuel. You have amazing energy. You don't get a crash after the meal. You wake up in the morning with energy. That energy carries you throughout the entire day. You're not having to rely on stimulants. You're not having to snack for a short burst of energy. You could fast when you want to and feast when you want to, and you don't notice a difference. Like, your body just feels great either way. And that's the way I feel. And that's not the way I felt for 20 plus years, but it's because I've adopted the principles in metabolic freedom. And look, the first step is to teach your metabolism to burn fat instead of sugar, right? We mentioned the insulin piece. It's a good idea to get a fasting insulin blood test. You want that under 5. Like Esra said, 12 is high, 19 is high, and higher than that is super high. But maybe you get that test done. But you want to eliminate the snacks, right? That is the number one thing that holds a lot of people back. They think they're doing something right because they heard that when you snack and you graze, you are revving up your metabolism. You're adding this fire to the fuel to the fire, but it's not doing that. Snacking and grazing is actually causing you to age faster than anybody you know. So start by eating 3 meals a day, no snacks in between. And if you want snacks, have them with your meals. That's a good start for somebody who's an absolute beginner. Then the next step would be, okay, now those meals should be focused on real food, single ingredient foods, whether it's protein, fat, or carbs. I don't really care in the beginning. Just switch it over to real food. So instead of having potato chips, you have a potato. That's an example right there. And then as you do these changes, you're going to make some progress. And then eventually you could start lowering your carbs, low enough to enter ketosis, which I'm a big fan of. Then you could start practicing intermittent fasting, which I'm a big fan of. But you don't just add all those things all at once. You start preparing that metabolism. And, you know, in Metabolic Freedom, I have a 30-day protocol to kind of show you how to do that. But for your audience, for them to take action right now, so you don't have to wait for the Turkish version to come out, like, that's where I would start. And then the sleep is a big piece of that. So here's another great tip for your audience. You know, one of the things I've realized over the years, Esra, I've been now in this health space, metabolic health space for 18 plus years. The most important window for fat loss during a 24-hour period is not during exercise. It's not during your fasting window. It's not with your low-carb, keto-friendly carnivore meals. The most important window for fat loss is the 3 to 4 hours after you've fallen asleep. It's during deep delta sleep. That's when you produce most of your growth hormone, which is fat burning, anti-aging, muscle building. That's when you get your fat-burning hormones working for you. But here's the thing. You could do everything right during the day. Insulin-friendly meals, fasting, exercise, single ingredient foods, but eat right before bed and miss that entire fat-burning window. Because once you raise insulin by eating right before bed, insulin stays elevated for hours and you miss that entire wave of growth hormone. Melatonin plummets, and then by the time insulin drops, you've already missed that window. So by following what I call the 3-hour rule, the kitchen is closed rule, great start, meaning no food at least 3 hours before bed. If you go to bed at 11 p.m., last bite of food should be at 8 p.m. at the latest, which allows insulin to drop, which then maximizes that fat burning window. So those are a lot of free things your audience can do. I would start with the 3-hour rule and then work from there.
I watched one of your videos, solo video, and it was about fasting. And do you think you can like faster version, faster version, because it was like a half-hour video. 1 day fast, what it does, like 12 hours, 24 hours, and then 30 some hours, 72. Then you come to the 5 days and to come to the 7 days. It was so amazing. You even influenced me. Shall I start fasting? It was so motivating how you explained it. I think it would really help people to maybe to get into that, clean up their system as well. That's, I think, very important.
It is. Fasting is my favorite tool in the shed. It's the most powerful tool. It's the greatest thing you can do to like harness this innate intelligence, this inner physician within your cells. Now, it's not something that beginners start with, but you work your way here. And what happens inside of your body when you go without food for 24 hours, 48 hours, and up to 7 days is incredible, right? So the first day, let's say 24 hours without food, within just the first 17 hours, you have two really amazing benefits. Number one, you've lowered insulin. We already talked about why that's important for fat loss, but you've completed digestion at that point. And it takes a lot of energy to digest food. So there's a process that gets kickstarted called energy diversion, which simply means the energy that was being used for digestion, that's complete. Now that energy is being diverted to the brain for focus and mental clarity. The second thing happening just 17 hours in is autophagy, this cellular cleanup process, is getting ramped up. It's, as I explained in that video you mentioned, it's like Pac-Man going within your cells, eating up damaged cells, damaged mitochondria, cells that eventually could turn cancerous one day, cells that are not burning fat efficiently, that are not producing energy efficiently. Your body starts eating that for fuel. Then 24 hours in, which is 1 day without food, there's a surge in human growth hormone. For men, studies are showing 2,000% increase in human growth hormone 24 hours into a fast. And for women, 1,300%, which is important for fat loss, anti-aging, muscle preserving. Then we have 30 hours in, where the brain gets flooded with something called BDNF, brain-derived neurotropic factor, which is like brain fertilizer, miracle grow for the brain. So you get this focus and this clarity where you're just ready to get things done and feel amazing. 36 hours in, you've now depleted your sugar reserves, called your glycogen stores, because you've lowered insulin so much that the body has now switched over to using fat for fuel. Okay, fat that's around your visceral fat, the organ fat, the belly fat, the love handles, the neck fat. Your body starts using that for fuel. Those fatty acids are sent to your liver. Your liver uses it for energy, and then it produces ketones, which are anti-inflammatory. They help the mitochondria produce more energy, which a lot of benefits there. That's just 36 hours. Now we have 2 days without food, which is 48 hours. This is where, this is super cool, you reset the dopamine receptor sites in your brain. So dopamine is the chemical your brain produces to help you have drive, motivation. It helps you feel good. It helps you feel grateful. When you are constantly being flooded with stimulation, artificial lights, scrolling on your cell phone, processed junk food, drugs and addictions, you've depleted your dopamine levels. Now you need more dopamine to feel the same way. Well, 48 hours into a fast, you've now reset those D2 receptor sites in your brain. So you need less stimulation to feel happy, healthy, content, motivated, driven. It's called dopamine fasting. It's very cool. Then we have 3 days without food, 72 hours. And Dr. Walter Longo from USC was one of the first researchers to show what happens here. There is going to be a an eating of your senescent cells. So we have cells in our immune system called immunosenescent cells. These are like zombie cells that are just hanging around the body, infecting other cells that are creating disease, autoimmune, other diseases. Well, at that 72-hour mark of a fast, that autophagy is ramped up, and you have this massive eating of these zombie cells. You completely regenerate your immune system in 72 hours, which is very cool. Now, as we complete this fast, 5 days in, 7 days in, as you break the fast, what happens is you now get a surge of stem cells produced. And you know all about stem cell therapy. Great. Get some healthy stem cells injected into you. It could help you feel younger, look younger. But what if you could get a surge of free stem cells? And you can with a 5-day fast, 7-day fast. And what's really cool is that the body is so smart. It will use those stem cells where it's needed most. So let's say it's an old injury, lower back injury, or some knee pain you had in the past, or the liver needs some new cells. It'll send it where it's needed. So this long fast, it's called a block fast, is one of the most incredible things you can do to restore your body, your brain, your hormones, your immune system. It's very powerful, and I love it. I do this sort of long fast at least once a year to get these benefits.
I have a question. When you do that, are you eliminating like everything, meaning coffee, some like herbal teas, your supplements, like you stop everything? It's just like straight water fast, or you still take your supplements and stuff?
I have water. I have unflavored electrolytes. I do have coffee, but I drink a clean coffee. I'm not really a tea drinker, but if it was an herbal tea that's unsweetened, I would have that. Supplements, not so much. Other than the electrolytes and the minerals, like magnesium and salt, I'm not really having supplements. So that's it. I'm not having food. I'm not having snacks. I'm not having bone broth, no smoothies, no juices. What would violate these benefits is anything that will raise glucose and insulin, and anything that will start the digestive processes. And coffee, tea, if it's unsweetened and clean, and unflavored electrolytes will not do that. So for me, it's safe during a long fast.
You know, the first time I heard about this long water fast, it was, I think he's one of your mentors, Dr. Daniel Pompa. It was in 2019 at Dave Asprey's conference. I have his book from then, actually, and he was sharing that his wife healed herself with water fasting. I think she had some autoimmune disorder or something. So that was the first time I heard about this whole like long water fast, but they were talking maybe even longer. It's tough. Let's jump in for a little bit to this new book, Keto Flex Revised, because over there you're even using the strategic carb flex days and everything. It's an interesting thing. Why did you decide to revise the Keto Flex book?
I originally wrote Keto Flex back in 2021. I self-published it. And, since then I've worked with a few more thousand people who I've put through these different protocols, and students from all across the world. And then there's been newer research and newer breakthroughs and newer things I've done just by my own experiments. So I wanted to revise the book. So it's about 70% changed from what the original version was. And there's, I wanted to customize it, right? I wanted to have a plan in here for women to do this the right way. So when I say women, there's an entire chapter for women who have a menstrual cycle. How do you do ketone fasting? Here's your blueprint. Women who don't have a menstrual cycle, who are in their postmenopausal years, here's how you do it. And then us men, here's how you do it. So it's customized. It's a 45-day plan. It goes through the exact 4 pillars that I have in my online programs that I've taken tens of thousands of people through. So it outlines the 4 pillars and it teaches you how to get through each pillar. And then once you finish the 4 pillars, or the first 3 pillars, which is 45 days, then you unlock the customized plan, which is the keto flexing, which you mentioned, or the higher healthy carb days, and how that actually helps to prevent plateaus, to overcome plateaus, to make hormonal conversion. So I'm really excited about it. If you like to listen to audiobooks, the audio version has some special details in it, because at the end of each chapter, I narrated the entire book myself, but at the end of each chapter, I go through these coaching sessions where I just answer questions and I go a little bit deeper into each chapter at the end of each chapter. So it's available hardcover, it's available on Kindle, and then audios, including Audible and Spotify as well. And the best place to get this book, if you want some bonuses, is ketoflexbook.com.
So what I remember from our first podcast, actually, when you were having clients and walking them through with a ketogenic diet, your focus actually was not really if they want to lose fat. Your focus was not high fat, but your focus was like introducing fat to their system as a fuel. Then you were pulling the fat away. So you get stuck with what? Just protein at that point?
Yeah, well, not just protein, but I'm glad you remember that because yes, in the beginning, and there's a lot of different ways to do keto. Not every way is going to be beneficial. The way that I teach it in Keto Flex is the way that you just described. Like in the beginning, I want to teach your body to start using fat for fuel, meaning it is going to be higher fat. You're going to eat higher healthy fats, and I show you which fats to eat. Once I get you fat adapted, which is the first 7 days in the protocol, we remove the fat, but we only get fat that comes with the protein. So you're not getting zero fat, but you're getting like a ribeye steak has protein, but it has some fat. Okay. Eggs with the yolk has protein, but it has some fat. But you're not intentionally eating a whole bunch of fat just because you think it's a high fat diet. You're just getting the fat that comes naturally with the protein. So it's going to be lower fat than what most people are used to with keto.
Would you like to share a little bit how women does these? So first of all, remind us please the stages, the 4 pillars, the 3 pillars and the plus pillars of the Keto Flex.
Let me jump in for a very quick second. If you can hear me right now, we know you're watching Soberhead. But are you subscribed? Could you check it for me? Very honestly, our subscriber count gives us real leverage when it comes to convincing the guests we invite to join the show. So, if you want to keep watching some of the best experts in their field right here, please subscribe to the channel.
The first pillar is adapt. So we get you fat adapted. We teach your metabolism to burn fat, stored fat instead of sugar from food. And it takes 7 days to do that pretty quickly. The second pillar is fast, which is now we adopt fasting strategies. You're not going to do a 7-day fast here, but you're going to do intermittent fasting. So we gradually increase that fasting muscle. The third pillar is called phase. We phase out these pro-inflammatory foods that have higher anti-nutrients that trigger the damaging of your gut lining, that trigger autoimmune disease. There's different variations of it. It could be a carnivore diet, but it's an elimination diet. And then 4 is the fourth pillar, which is the flex pillar, So you're flexing in and out, and that's where it gets customized. So for women, for example, if you have a menstrual cycle, the best time to do ketosis, fasting, these biohacks like cold plunging, sauna, red light, the best week to do that is the week of your menstrual cycle, the bleed week. When the hormones are low, these stressors could be high. So that's the week you could do a long fast as well. The worst time to do ketosis, fasting, all these biohacks is going to be the week before your period. You want to build hormones and you don't do that with these stressors. So that's one example, and I go even deeper in the book. For postmenopausal women, the biggest thing here is to really work on stress, because as the ovaries shut down, the adrenal glands are picking up the slack. So I talk about ways to raise oxytocin. I talk about certain requirements for protein and calcium to build or to maintain your strength, and while strength training is really important at this time. But then there's different ways to do the flexing part. I give different strategies on how to do it. But those are some examples on, some general examples on how women should customize their approach.
Ben, what is your food philosophy in a way that, are you eating high protein diet?
I get enough protein. So I get about a gram of protein.
So not high, you're just leveling yourself with more medium range.
Yeah, I have some days where it's high. I have some days where it's medium. I kind of go back and forth, but it's definitely not a low protein diet. Protein is a focus, especially on my heavy training days. It's going to be higher in protein, but I'm getting at least a gram of protein per pound of my total body weight.
Per pound. Yeah. Okay, I thought for a second kilo. That's why I said it's not that high. Okay, you've been in this field for a long time, and there's so much debate out there. Eat this, don't eat that. And you mentioned about Walter Longo, and I did an interview with him, and he's more like in the Mediterranean diet and more towards plant-based. This whole longevity thing, at the end of the day, we're not yet going to live up until whatever, 180. Everybody says that. I did interviews with Aubrey de Grey and Brian Kennedy and so on and so forth, and they said it's not there yet. So basically, in my opinion, and I'm going to ask what are your thoughts, we have to feed our body whatever it's needed at that point. If you have menopause and if you need to build muscle to protect your bones, you need to eat protein. You cannot eat plant-based diet forever, or you need these amino acids. So you are living in that field. I'm kind of from outside, I get in and out. Why is that debate? Why there's so much confusion?
Yeah, it's a lot of confusion. Plant-based, carnivore, keto, more protein, less protein. I think it's because the amount of information we have this day. Before we used to lack information. That was the problem. Now we have too much information and we're drowning in information, but starving for truth. And there's so many studies out there that you could manipulate or cherry pick and prove your point. I'm getting sick and tired of all these studies, these references. Now, I think it's important to have studies and references, especially on real studies, human beings, not animals, but it's just too much for people. It's like what you just said was very important, because who cares what the studies show? What actually works when you do it? And, depending on where you're at in your life, your health history or goals, the study doesn't matter, because the study wasn't looking at that exact version of you right now. It's, you are different. You have different goals. So find that plan that works for you. And the only way to find that plan is to experiment with different things. Don't follow 10 people on fat loss or 10 people on longevity. Follow 1, 2, 3 people maximum and go deep with what they're teaching. If you resonate with their personality, go deep with what they're teaching. Give it 3 months, 6 months, see what it does for you. Maybe it's the exact protocol you need and there's no need to follow anybody else. Or maybe their information didn't work for you, then you find somebody else to follow. If it's me, if I'm resonating with you and you like what I'm sharing here, hopefully you could get the book and you could follow my protocol. But don't follow a whole bunch of different people. Follow just 2 or 3 and go deep in their information and find that custom plan that works for you. That would be my recommendation.
That was a great recommendation. Do you have any last messages to the country that I'm in, and you from a neighboring country? So
I am. Yeah. I'm from Iran, and I've only been at the airport in Turkey, which I think is the nicest airport in the world. I was just so impressed, but unfortunately I was just at the airport going to Saudi and back. Next year, when the new book comes out, the Belly Fat book, I do want to make a tour to Turkey. I would love that. I think I told you this before, but as a kid, my mom's best friend was Turkish, and I grew up with her 2 sons. Their last names were Altinasik. And, I used to call them my cousins, even though they were not my cousins, but they were like my fake cousins. And I became really aware of the Turkish culture, and it's very similar to the Iranian culture. And there's a place in my heart for Turkish people. And I would love to go to your beautiful country. My wife, she sees these TikTok videos of Turkey and she sees all the cats in the street, and she's a huge cat person.
Oh my God.
She wants to go for the cats.
Yeah, the cats are in hospitals, in restaurants, in barber shops, in clinics, everywhere. When is the book going to be out?
Q1, the first quarter of it. So it would be the first part. Yeah, it's going to be either March or May of 2027. We haven't finalized the date, but Q1, sometime around there. And, for Turkey, I love the country. I love the food. I love the people. Hopefully this message lands with you. What I love about the Turkish community, they practice this right here, the vitamin G.
Yep.
They enjoy their meals.
Family.
They enjoy their company, family, friends. That is something that is lacking here in the United States. We have a vitamin G deficiency, but I see Turkish people really live that, and I really respect that. And I can't wait to see you in Turkey in person. I would love to.
You will.
For you to give me a tour of your beautiful country.
Thank you very much for your time, Ben.
Thank you, Esra. I appreciate you.